I think Anthony Fauci accepting the pardon, he doesn't escape judgment. I think history is going to judge him harshly. So in some ways, from that point of view, I think he made a huge mistake accepting the pardon. If he wanted people to think he was innocent, you can actually reject a pardon. There's also Supreme Court precedent for when you accept a pardon, accepting guilt. And so in many ways, he has accepted guilt. Now, his pardon is unspecified. It's preemptive and nonspecific, but that also means that it's going to be the burden on him to try to prove that he was innocent after accepting a pardon. My specific plans and my specific target of my investigation is fairly narrowly focused. The research that went on in China was funded by the U.S. government. We know that. But we also know that after 2016, there was a safety committee set up that was supposed to investigate dangerous or gain-of-function research before the money was spent. The money for Wuhan, China, never went before the committee. We do think it was discussed, but we want to see the deliberations. We want to know who was in the meeting and what did they say. If you argued for that it was safe or someone argued that it was against, let's hear and read those arguments, because they made a mistake. They went around the safety committee, and now we have the Department of Energy, FBI, CIA, all admitting that they think the evidence leans towards this coming from a lab. That means a big judgment error was made in funding this lab, and an even bigger, maybe not judgment, but even malfeasance occurred in not sending it to the safety committee. This has all been sort of sidestepped. So I'm actually looking for a very specific meeting or two or three where it was discussed. We know it exists from Freedom of Information. They have never admitted that they discussed it. Well, they kind of say, oh, yeah, we discussed it and said it wasn't gain of function, but they don't give us any of the deliberations or meetings. We now know some meetings existed because we have the subject headline. We know it was about the gain of function research in Wuhan, but then everything's redacted and no associated materials have been given to us. So we're going to try to get that information, that debate, the people who attended it, and ultimately, you would think there'd be a chain of command that someone up the ladder, either Anthony Fauci or Francis Collins, would ultimately have to approve that funding, that it doesn't need to go to the safety committee. If it does link to Anthony Fauci, we will have him come back in and testify. And you're right. They say once you've accepted a pardon, you can't come in and plead the Fifth Amendment on something you've already been pardoned for. He will be made to testify. But I am not just going to bring him in to testify without having the documents, because without the documents, he's a sophisticated liar. And I think he will dissemble, is a nice way to put it. He will be disingenuous, and he will split hairs to try to avoid culpability. And that's what he's done throughout my exchanges with him. But we are going to have a friendly administration. I hope Bobby Kennedy will be in charge of HHS, which oversees NIH. I also have met and know Jay Bhattacharya, who I think is a wonderful pick. And I think they will give transparency. I think we will finally have light shed on this that has been hidden for 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, and what a relief that's going to be for so many Americans that have completely lost trust in the government's capacity to navigate a global pandemic.
Yeah, and I think overall global trust, or government trust, is at an all-time low.
Yeah.
And they want to blame people like me or Bobby Kennedy for sowing distrust. But it's really when people are dishonest with you and the government is dishonest, that's where the distrust comes from. Mm-hmm. That's why I think Bobby Kennedy can actually restore trust in government pronouncements and in the government by putting forward the studies. Let's expose everything. Yeah. Let's just be very honest. And there's some facts that I don't know the answer to, but I think that the data is there. So let's say you're like many people over 65 and you're not one way or another on vaccines, but you saw a lot of old people dying and you said, I'll take the vaccine. Most people over 65 did take a couple of vaccines at least. So let's say you took 2 COVID vaccines and you've had COVID at least twice. That's a lot of people. That's really what happened to most people. They took the vaccines, they got it, but then the argument is, well, they didn't get as sick. But the argument moving forward is, what is their risk now? So let's say I decide I'm tired of taking the vaccines, now I'm a little worried about it, or I don't think it's that dangerous and I've already had it. What is my risk of going to the hospital? What's a concrete number? Give me a number. What's my risk of dying? I think of going to the hospital is close to zero and of dying is close to zero. Now, there are other factors. Do I have diabetes? Am I overweight? Am I 120 years old? There's a lot of factors that go into this. But let's sort that out. Let's present the data. Instead, we get every 6 months you should keep taking a vaccine for COVID. And it doesn't seem honest to some of us. And then we now have Pfizer paying $800 million to the NIH to share the patent. We have Moderna paying $400 million, over $1 trillion. And so it becomes, I would think, impossible for a human to be objective. You know, if you give me $1 trillion, I'm going to be somewhat biased towards the person who gave me the $1 trillion. And so there are these problems with conflicts of interest. But I think the CDC has enormous amounts of data. I've met Dave Weldon, the nominee for that. I think he'll be good also. Let's put the data out there so people can make an honest decision.
Yeah.
And also, the risks and benefits may differ depending on your age. Definitely with COVID, there's a huge difference in your risk, whether you're 10 years old or whether you're 85 years old. And just get the facts so people can make an honest decision. And I would never want to prevent somebody from getting the COVID vaccine if they were 80 or if they were 5. Now, I think it really, given the evidence, I would say it's malpractice to give it to a 5-year-old. But to an 80-year-old, I'm sort of in the middle and, you know, give the facts, but give us the updated facts. In 2020, it was much more dangerous than it is today for 2 reasons. The virus has mutated gradually to become less dangerous, and this is fairly common with viruses, but also our immunity has continued to go up for 2 reasons. One, naturally acquired immunity, but also the vaccine has increased immunity as well. So we have increased immunity and decreased virulence. And so let's assess it now. Give us an idea. What was the death rate in 2020, in March of 2020? What's the death rate now? And do I need more vaccines? Do I have to take a vaccine every 6 months, you know? And I don't think we've been honest about that. Unfortunately, most people in Washington, these senators, they don't want to hear that. They don't, you know, they want blind allegiance. And blind allegiance isn't the way medicine works. I mean, talk to anybody who's had cancer about all the choices you have, trying to figure it out. What should I take? You know, what are my chances of survival? What are the side effects? You know, government shouldn't tell you that. Medicine should inform you as to the possibilities, the risks. Everything has risks, everything has side effects, and then everybody has to make their own decision. You know, some people are given 4 months to live and have pancreatic cancer, and they say, I don't want any treatment. I'm going to live my life the best I can for 4 months. And can I get 5 months by taking all these things? Some people will, some won't. It's, you know, there's such personal decisions, which are really about bodily choice, and you'd think the left would be better on this. But they seem to be on some medical decisions and not on other medical decisions.
Yeah, you know, people today are publishing how much money each of these senators at the confirmation hearing today received from pharma and medical industry. And it's astounding how much money has gone into some of these individuals that claim they're these Democratic heroes for the little guy. You know, Warren and Bernie together have amassed millions of dollars of receipts from Big Pharma. And that is a huge sum of money when you're talking about these races that they're in. So that's not how much it takes to win these races. I've analyzed it. You know, so they're getting all of this money to do this work effectively on behalf of these companies to effectively be a marketing extension for them. And worse, ensure that the federal government and our tax dollars continue to buy their products. And I have to share with you, Senator, I've had many startups and mid-size biotech companies reach out to me and say, hey, you know, we are actually developing a safer vaccine and we just can't get through because, you know, Pfizer and Moderna, they're monopolies at this point. Merck, they have a monopoly and there's no competition. And so, of course, you know, like we can spend all of this time and investment into researching safer vaccines, but we just can't break through in the market because the government has created these monopolies.
Yeah, you think about it. There's all the money, the monetary influence of big pharma on politicians. But then there's the big pharma contributions in the form of advertising that goes to news channels. So those news channels are very biased in favor of one opinion because of the advertising. But then it's even worse. We now pay doctors directly to give vaccines. Yeah. And we got away from this. When I started my training, there was many dinners and things that were legal to go to, and the big pharma came in and bought dinners for residents and young doctors who weren't making much money. They finally went away from that, and it's actually, if not illegal, we made it unethical, so doctors can't accept it, and big pharma pretty much doesn't do those things anymore. But I think it's equally as insidious or worse that they actually pay direct cash now for doing vaccines on children, which really I think the science isn't good for the COVID vaccine, because the death rate is essentially zero for healthy children, and because even the hospitalization rate is close to zero for healthy children for COVID, and that was even in 2020. Now it's getting closer and closer and closer to zero, because kids just, almost every kid's had this, and kids just don't get, it's hard to tell when a kid has had COVID because they just don't get very sick. But, you know, we've had this evolution of things, and yet still we're paying doctors money, and it's not an insignificant amount. I think some of the doctors were making in the at least the thousands of dollars, maybe not tens of thousands of dollars on vaccines by pushing them. And that's not right.